Syria's foreign minister warns Israeli attacks are driving regional escalation. The U.S. ambassador to Lebanon says Israel does not need U.S. approval to defend itself. And Egypt says Palestinian self-determination is a historic right. Good afternoon, live from Cairo. This is Q News. I'm Mark Summers. It's 4 o'clock. Syria's Foreign Minister Assad al-Shabani says repeated Israeli attacks are pushing the whole region toward escalation, calling on the international community to take firm action. Speaking at a joint press conference in Damascus with Denmark's Foreign Minister, al-Shabani said Israel's repeated strikes are driving the region toward further escalation. He urged the international community to adopt a decisive position to stop what he described as ongoing Israeli attacks. Israel has not responded to al-Shabani's remarks in the account provided. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Rasmussen says he hopes sanctions on Syria will be fully lifted, adding some Danish companies are interested in investing as Damascus pushes for recovery. Speaking alongside Syrian Foreign Minister Assad al-Shabani in Damascus, Rasmussen said he wants to see sanctions on Syria removed completely. He added that some Danish companies have signaled interest in investing in Syria. Rasmussen said he discussed with al-Shabani ways to support Syria's recovery efforts and state building, as Syria seeks greater international engagement and economic reintegration.
People on a not permanent permission.
Syria's Information Minister Hamza al-Mustafa has condemned what he called Israeli provocations, saying Israel is trying to drag Damascus into confrontation. Al-Mustafa said Israel is using repeated provocations to push Syria toward a wider clash and warned Israeli forces are miscalculating if they believe they can impose new realities on the ground. He stressed Syria will not be a platform to threaten neighboring countries, but said Damascus will use all available means to confront and deter Israeli attacks. The minister also said Syria is not in a position of strength and wants to focus on rebuilding and recovery. Syrian media says Israeli warplanes and drones have been flying over northern Quneitra and the Damascus countryside, a day after an Israeli attack in the area reportedly killed 15 people. Syrian reports say Israeli fighter jets and drones were seen over northern rural Quneitra and parts of the Damascus countryside. The flights follow an incident a day earlier when Israeli forces attacked a town near the capital, with Syrian accounts saying 15 people were killed. The reports say Israeli forces entered the area to arrest young men. Residents confronted them, and the troops later withdrew. Separately, the reports say Israeli reconnaissance aircraft are flying intensively over Beit Jin in southern Syria.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
The U.S. ambassador to Lebanon says Israel does not need U.S. permission to defend its citizens, and he urged Lebanon to move ahead with disarming Hezbollah. U.S. ambassador to Lebanon, Michael Issa, said Israel can assess its own security needs and take steps it deems necessary without seeking approval from Washington. In remarks to Israeli media, Issa said disarming Hezbollah would secure Lebanon's future and restore state authority. He also called on the Lebanese government to implement what he described as a historic decision to disarm Hezbollah. Hezbollah has not responded in the account provided to the ambassador's remarks. Israeli public broadcaster reports a growing risk of wider escalation in Lebanon, as Israel says it will not allow Hezbollah to rebuild its capabilities. According to Israel's public broadcaster, political and security assessments suggest Hezbollah is still reinforcing its presence, raising concerns of a broader escalation. Israel's military said it will not allow Hezbollah to rebuild and called on the Lebanese state to continue efforts to disarm the group. It also claimed the Lebanese army disarmament efforts are insufficient and warned it would respond with greater force to any attempt by Hezbollah to undermine Israel's security. Hezbollah has not responded. Lebanon's national news agency says Israeli drones have intensified flights over eastern and southern Lebanon, including an incident at Mez el-Jabal. The agency reported increased Israeli drone activity over eastern and southern parts of the country. It said an Israeli drone dropped what it described as a sound bomb on the town of Mez el-Jabal in the Marjayun district of Nabatea Governorate in southern Lebanon. There was no immediate Israeli comment. Egypt says Palestinian self-determination and an independent state on June 4, 1967 lines with East Jerusalem as its capital is a historic right, not just a political demand. In a statement marking the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, Egypt's foreign ministry said Palestinian self-determination and statehood on the June 4, 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital is a historical entitlement backed by international legitimacy. The ministry said Egypt will continue close coordination with the United States and regional partners to ensure full implementation of President Trump's peace plan and advance its related mechanisms in a way that preserves Palestinian rights and supports regional stability. Egypt's House Speaker Hanafi El-Gabari says Egypt's efforts helped secure an agreement to stop the war in Gaza, rejecting any plan to divide the Strip or displace its people. Speaking at the opening session of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Union for the Mediterranean Forum and the Summit of Speakers, El-Gabari said Egypt's intensive efforts culminated in an agreement to halt the Gaza war. He stressed Egypt's firm rejection of any attempt to partition the Strip or forcibly displace its residents, warning against measures that would undermine Palestinian rights and regional stability. Medics in southern Gaza say an Israeli strike killed 2 children on Saturday, as near daily violence continues despite the ceasefire that began on October 10th. Doctors at Nasser Medical Hospital say 2 boys were killed in the Israeli strike today. Their uncles said an Israeli drone fired on the brothers, aged 10 and 12, as they gathered firewood for their father, who was previously injured and uses a wheelchair. At their funeral, witnesses said the father broke down as he held one child's body. The Israeli military did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Gaza health authorities say at least 354 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire began, while Israel says 3 of its soldiers have been killed by gunfire in the same period. Gaza's health ministry says the death toll in the Strip has risen to 70,100 That's since October 7th, 2023, with nearly 171,000 people reported injured. In a statement, the ministry said the number of injured has climbed to 170,983. It added that a number of victims are still believed to be under the rubble or on roads, and said ambulance and civil defense crews remain unable to reach some areas. Amnesty International says Israeli authorities are still committing genocide in Gaza, accusing Israel of fresh attacks and restricting aid access despite the ceasefire. Israel has repeatedly rejected genocide allegations. In a statement, Amnesty said there is no sign Israel is taking serious steps to reverse what it called the deadly impact of its actions in Gaza, and accused Israeli authorities of continuing policies that restrict humanitarian aid and essential services. The group said recent Israeli strikes hit parts of southern and central Gaza, including areas it says should be out of bounds under the ceasefire terms. Gaza's health authorities say hundreds of Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire took effect on October 10th, while Israel says 3 of its soldiers have been killed by gunfire in the same period. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says Palestinians have the right to dignity, justice and self-determination, urging renewed momentum toward a two-state solution. Guterres said the Palestinian people's rights to dignity, justice and self-determination must be respected, arguing those rights have been violated over the past 2 years. He reiterated his call to end what he described as the illegal occupation of Palestinian territory, and again urged irreversible progress towards a two-state solution, with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security.
Which, of course, includes the necessity to take into account the question of fossil fuels.
UNICEF is warning that worsening malnutrition as winter sets in is putting children's lives and health at risk in Gaza. UNICEF says malnutrition is worsening and could become even more dangerous during the winter, threatening children's survival and long-term health. It said nutrition screenings found around 9,300 children under 5 suffering from severe acute malnutrition in October. UNICEF urged all parties to open crossings into Gaza and allow humanitarian aid to enter through every possible supply route.
UNICEF is ready. The aid must flow. Israel must open as many entry points as possible.
So let's cross over to our newsroom. Hani Saif is there for us. Hani.
Thank you, Mark. For further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by the chairman of the board of directors of the International Commission to Support Palestinian Rights, Dr. Salah Abdulati. Dr. Abdulati, welcome to Q News. Now, with the deadly incidents reported during a ceasefire, what's the most effective way to verify the violations quickly and hold the violators to account?
After greetings to you and your dear viewers, absolutely. Israel's continuous violations of the ceasefire deal and hindering the access of the humanitarian aids and to continue violations in the West Bank, through which continue the crimes of the colonization annexations, in addition to violations against the Palestinians. This means that Israel isn't fully much concerned about the violation of the UN resolution that lead the ceasefire and to guarantee the humanitarian response and to go forward of a just settlement of the Palestinian cause. This would require sending international forces according to humanitarian international law that guarantee the protection of the civilians and the sustained ceasefire, along with the withdrawal of the West Bank from the Israeli forces, along with going forward into the path and the track of the reconstruction.
Mm-hmm. Well, Amnesty alleges grave abuses, and Israel rejects the charge. So what independent review process could establish the facts credibly enough to guide the policy?
Certainly, there is an fact-finding committees internationally, along with the special rapporteurs, along the international human rights, including our commissions, that monitoring in the all violations. Israel up till now killed 83 of the Palestinian civilians, most of them from women and children, along with injuring thousands of civilians, alongside to continue destroying the civilian buildings under the Israeli control. That shelters and the mobile housing. As we've seen for the West or the Gaza Strip was swamped in the floods that affect the Palestinians who are living in a very violated or deteriorated shelters, and to hinder the access of the international journalists along with the civilians hospitals. That would require a pressure from the international community to cease the violations of the occupation, despite that all the data are covered by the international agencies.
Well, the UN is calling for a two-state solution, a track that cannot be reversed. So what near-term actions would show real movement rather than the declarations?
In the World Day of the solidarity with the Palestinian people, the steps of the United Nations should be translated to effective steps through resolutions and measures that lead the imposed sanctions against the occupation state, and to hold it accountable for the war crimes, and to force Israel to end its occupation. The self-determination right is a very solid right under the relevant UN resolutions, which are the shortest step to guarantee just and stable peace in the Middle East.
What about Egypt, Dr. Abdelati? What are Egypt's immediate priorities to stabilize Gaza while also keeping the ceasefire on track? How are these priorities being coordinated with the United States and regional partners?
Certainly, Egypt plays a very pivotal role in sustaining the ceasefire deal and succeeded to such, and formed a very solid preventive wall against the Israeli violation, and to mobilize the efforts of the international community for the reconstruction. All rely the Egyptian role, along with the role of moderators, Qatar, Turkey, and the USA. Egypt fully realizes the risks of the Israeli violation. Therefore, it pursues to mobilize the effort of the international community to have the ceasefire deal held, and prepares to the reconstructions and the early recovery convention to mobilize the international community efforts. In addition to pressure of a political trajectory that would lead to end the occupation and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state as Jerusalem as its capital.
Well, about the reconstruction process, how can Egypt leverage the upcoming reconstruction conference to lock in timelines, partner commitments, and transparent follow-through on projects inside Gaza?
Egypt proposed from the day one the early recovery and the reconstruction plan through which to reconstruct the sector, or rather the strip, within 5 years. This plan is blocking the way of an alternative plans and a need of a timetable to execute such a resolution, including sending the international forces for protection along with missions and a table and a timetable for the Israeli withdrawal. Following the Convention of Reconstruction would constitute a very main approachment to escalate the process of reconstruction and a recovery process. And Egypt is very much realizes the risk of the humanitarian conditions in the Strip in order to escalate the process of the reconstruction.
From Cairo, that was Dr. Salah Abdelati, the chairman of the board of directors of the International Commission to Support Palestinian Rights. Dr. Abdelati, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News. Now we go back to Mark in our studio. Mark.
Thank you very much, Hani. Hani safe there in our newsroom. Now to the Russia-Ukraine war, with a sharp escalation in aerial attacks overnight. Kyiv says that dozens of missiles and hundreds of drones hit multiple regions, raising fresh concerns over critical infrastructure, as Moscow says it carried out a large-scale strike on industrial and energy targets and reports intercepting more than 100 Ukrainian drones. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned of a new large-scale Russian escalation targeting vital infrastructure in his country. Zelensky confirmed that Moscow had launched around 36 missiles and nearly 600 drones over the past hours against multiple areas across Ukraine. The Ukrainian president stressed that air defenses are in urgent need of additional support. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that Russian forces targeted Ukrainian industrial and energy facilities in the early hours of this morning. The ministry stated that it had carried out a large-scale strike using precision weapons and drones, targeting Ukrainian military sites and energy installations as part of the ongoing military operation. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that air defense systems destroyed 103 Ukrainian drones during the night, which had targeted various regions of the country. Moscow also confirmed that it had destroyed numerous pieces of equipment, including German Leopard 2 tanks, and as well as American and British armored vehicles, in addition to a large number of other vehicles supplied by NATO countries. The EU says a high-profile corruption probe in Ukraine shows Kyiv's anti-graft agencies are functioning after investigators searched premises linked to a top aide to President Volodymyr Zelensky. An EU spokesperson said the investigation demonstrates Ukraine's anti-corruption institutions are working, following searches carried out by investigators. The comments come as Kyiv faces intense scrutiny over governance and accountability while seeking sustained Western backing. The EU has repeatedly linked financial support and long-term integration steps to continued reforms and strong enforcement against corruption.
Have a very solid, excellent team of lawyers in the Commission, as you know.
Meanwhile, China says its top diplomat, Wang Yi, will visit Russia next week for routine strategic security consultations, as Washington renews its push to end the war in Ukraine. Beijing's foreign minister says Wang Yi will travel to Russia from Monday to Tuesday for a regular China-Russia strategic security consultation. The announcement comes as the United States steps up efforts aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. China has maintained close ties with Russia throughout the conflict and has repeatedly called for negotiations, while Western capitals continue to track Beijing's diplomatic role and its engagement with Moscow. Damage to a launch pad at Russia's Baikonur cosmodrome in Kazakhstan was seen during a live broadcast of the Soyuz MS-28 mission, with reports suggesting the site may be offline for a period. The damage was visible on a live transmission of the Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft mission from Baikonur, Kazakhstan, following a joint launch involving U.S. participation. Russian space bloggers say the launch pad was seriously damaged and claim Roscosmos may be unable to conduct operations there for some time. Roscosmos has not confirmed those claims in the account provided. Russia's space program, long a source of national pride, has faced strain in recent years, including funding pressures and corruption scandals. In Indonesia's Aceh province, rescue teams have evacuated 2 men trapped in floodwaters after they were found clinging to trees as the death toll across Sumatra rises. Search and rescue crews in Aceh, Indonesia's westernmost province, pulled 2 men to safety after they became trapped and were seen clinging to trees amid widespread flooding. Officials say this week's floods and landslides across Sumatra Island have now killed at least 111 people, with operations continuing in hard-hit districts as waters recede and access improves in some areas. Sri Lanka's Air Force has released footage of rescue operations as floods and landslides push the death toll to 56, with at least 21 people still missing. The Air Force says helicopters have been deployed to evacuate villagers stranded by floodwaters in Anura Dapura as emergency teams continue searches in affected areas. In Colombo, residents have been filmed wading through flooded streets as water levels rise in low-lying neighborhoods. Authorities say the toll from flooding and landslides has climbed to 56 and at least 21 people remain unaccounted for as rescue operations continue. And that's almost all, but before we go, here's a recap of the main headlines this afternoon. Syria's foreign minister warns Israeli attacks are driving regional escalation. The U.S. ambassador to Lebanon says Israel does not need U.S. approval to defend itself. And Egypt says Palestinian self-determination is a historic right. Well, thanks for watching this afternoon. For more stories and live updates, you can follow Q News 24 hours a day at QNews EGY. Stay with us because In Depth is on the way next with Mona. From all of us here, thank you for watching and stay tuned for more.